Coming crawling back here expecting anything from us is not something you should do. Like a razor, my mother's voice sliced through the telephone. In the Burlington, Vermont, parking lot of my apartment building, I remained motionless, gripping my phone until my knuckles were white. Despite being whipped by the October wind, I was little affected by the chill. With a voice just above a whisper, I murmured, "Mom, I don't understand what I did wrong." Murmur. "Could we just have a conversation about this?" Speak. "Wendy, there's nothing to discuss. You made the decision to humiliate our family with your small act of disobedience. We have made a decision. You're not welcome here anymore. Remain away forever." I stared at my phone in shock as the call went dead. I was present for my sister Brooke's engagement celebration 3 days ago, which should have been a happy family occasion. Rather, it had become a nightmare. When I declined to mislead Brooke's prospective in-laws about my income, my mother had been upset that I wouldn't seem as though I was having financial difficulties in order to make Brooke appear more prosperous in comparison. I'm 27 years old, and my name is Wendy Parker. I've been a senior account manager at Velmark Automation, a successful manufacturing business with an emphasis on industrial robotics, for the last 5 years. My family believed that I was barely making ends meet at my menial office work, but the reality was very different. I was able to accumulate a sizable savings and a comfortable lifestyle thanks to my $85,000 yearly pay and performance bonuses. I didn't miss the irony. Victoria, my mother, had always been preoccupied with appearances and the perception of the family. She maintained the facade of prosperity that has characterized our family for decades by living in the same expansive home in the affluent suburb where I grew up. She was unaware that her disappointed daughter had surpassed all other family members in terms of financial success. With my head spinning after the chat, I made my way back to my flat. I felt the customary burden of disappointment from my family. This time, though, something felt different. My mother's statements had a finality that made my stomach turn. I became aware that my hands were shaking as I unlocked my door. It came from an increasing realization that this encounter was only the start of something much more significant, not from coldness. A text message from an unknown number buzzed through my phone. "Financial issues in the family need to be addressed right away. Get in touch with Northwell Financial Services Benjamin Harris." Confused, I gazed at the message. I had recently been exiled for good, so why would a financial advisor be contacting me with family matters? I got the uneasy impression that the worst was still to come, and something was seriously wrong. Being raised in the Parker home meant that appearances were a constant source of stress. Victoria, my mother, had centered her entire identity on how our family was viewed in Burlington's social circles. She threw lavish dinner parties, worked on charitable boards, and kept our home clean. Always had a magazine-like appearance. The golden kid has always been my sister Brooke, who is 3 years older than me. She immediately married her college sweetheart after graduating, settling into a routine of social responsibilities and part-time employment. Brooke knew the rules of the game. She was perfectly aware of how to behave and speak in order to gain our mother's acceptance. The family had always been disappointed with me, though. I decided not to rush into marriage after college and instead to concentrate on developing my profession. I gradually rose up the corporate ladder at Mark Automation by putting in a lot of overtime and taking on difficult projects. However, success means a lot to my family. Was evaluated based on customary milestones and social ties rather than career accomplishments. I started working in manufacturing 5 years ago, which is when the trouble began. My mother had been appalled that her daughter would accept a job in what she derisively referred to as factory work. She was unable to comprehend that maintaining client relationships for industrial robotic systems was a difficult and lucrative job, or that modern production required advanced engineering and technology. "Why are you unable to locate something more appropriate?" At family meals, she would inquire. Something at an office, such as being employed by a bank or a legal practice. Nothing I said could modify Victoria's preconceived notions, even though I tried to clarify that I did work in an office and that I spent my days managing contracts worth millions of dollars and liaising with engineering teams. I was the daughter who had made do with less. In her mind, every year, the gap between my family's vision and my reality in terms of money widened. They thought I was having trouble, but I had been discreetly accumulating wealth. Even Brooke couldn't say that she owned her flat outright, and my investment portfolio had increased significantly. However, I had kept this information to myself, in part for privacy reasons and in part because I knew it would make things more difficult in the family. I'd unwittingly played the part Victoria needed to feel superior to someone. The carefully crafted story Mom had created about our family would have been appended if she had revealed my success. The breaking point had been the engagement party 3 days prior. I had given an honest response regarding my job at Velmark Automation when Brooke's future in-laws inquired about it. I talked about the difficult tasks we were working on and the foreign clientele I oversaw. Every phrase had darkened Victoria's face. She drew me aside later that night and insisted that I minimize my accomplishments at upcoming family gatherings. "It makes Brooke look bad when you go on about your little job," she screamed. I had declined, and it seems that this had been the last straw. "Can't you just say you're doing okay and leave it at that?" 2 days following my mother's tragic phone call, I drove by the house I grew up in out of habit. My heart sank even more when I saw what I did. They had replaced the locks. The entrance door was gleaming with new brass deadbolts. Additionally, my key stopped working when I tested it. I spent the first 18 years of my life in the family house, which Victoria had literally locked me out of. I stared at the house that no longer welcomed me while I sat in my car in the driveway. The immaculately mowed lawn was as immaculate as ever, and the rose bushes Victoria had so carefully tended were already beginning to show indications of autumn dormancy. From the outside, everything seemed normal, but I was no longer included in this image. A neighbor who was out walking her dog gave me a tentative wave, obviously perplexed by my appearance. Even though Mr. Henderson had known me since I was a young child, I could see he was unsure of himself. Victoria had declared me unwelcome to the neighbors. My cheeks burned with shame at the notion. I felt dislocated and empty as I drove home. I attempted to call Brooke that night in the hopes that she could explain what had caused our mother to react so strongly. The call immediately ended up in voicemail. "It's Wendy, Brooke. I am aware that wedding preparations are likely keeping you very busy, but I have to speak with you. I don't know what I did that was so awful, and Mom has cut me off entirely. Give me a call back, please." However, days went by with no answer. It was evident that Brooke had made a decision that wasn't mine. I turned to work as a haven during this trying time. Although my coworkers at Velmark Automation saw that I was distracted, I returned to my work with a fresh sense of purpose. It took continual concentration to oversee the installation of computerized assembly lines for our automotive clients, and the rigorous routine helped me forget about the drama in my home. On Thursday afternoon, Director Gregory Walsh, my supervisor, summoned me to his office. "I wanted to talk to Wendy about the manufacturing deal with Peterson. Because of your outstanding job on this project, the client particularly asked you to expand next quarter." The value of the Peterson contract was $2.8 million, which was the biggest transaction I had ever handled on my own. This would have been a reason to celebrate in a normal situation. Rather, I experienced the cruel irony of losing my family while succeeding professionally. I responded with a stifled eagerness, "Thank you, Gregory. I appreciate the confidence you're showing in me. Are you okay?" He said, "You seem distracted lately," in a kind but worried tone. "Just dealing with some personal matters," I said, "nothing that will affect my work." As I left his office, I became aware of how my personal life was falling apart while my professional life was flourishing, and the contrast felt painful and unreal. At 6:47 p.m. that night, my phone rang with a call that would alter everything. I had everything I had worked for, including respect from my peers, job success, and financial security, but I had lost the family ties I had always thought would last. "Miss Parker, This is Benjamin Harris from Northwell Financial Services. I nearly let the number go to voicemail on a Friday night while I was reheating some leftover Thai food and trying to divert my attention with a wildlife conservation documentary. But I was forced to answer at the last minute. I put down my fork, suddenly without appetite, and said, "I'm sorry, but I think you have the wrong person. I need to talk to you about your family's financial situation immediately. I don't handle my family's money. In reality, you're listed as the primary beneficiary and emergency contact for both your mother's and sister's investment accounts, according to the documents I have here. I've been trying to get in touch with Victoria Parker for 3 weeks without success, and the situation has gotten critical. More involved than you realize," Benjamin said, his voice strained with an emotion I couldn't place. "That's impossible." Benjamin clarified, "The paperwork was filed 18 months ago. Miss Parker, I really need to meet with you in person. There are some very serious issues we need to discuss, and I can't go into detail. My mother just told me I'm no longer welcome in the family. Why would I be listed on her accounts?" I agreed to see him at his office at 10 a.m., my head buzzing with questions, and after hanging up, I paced my apartment. "Will you be available tomorrow morning?" Attempting to make sense of this development, why would Victoria list me as her emergency contact and beneficiary while removing me from her life at the same time? The contradiction was incomprehensible. Saturday morning arrived gray and rainy, which was exactly how I felt. Northwell Financial Services was located in a small office building downtown, and Benjamin Harris was a quiet man in his 50s who likely assisted clients in discussing challenging financial matters. Realities. He pointed to a chair opposite from his desk and said, "Thank you for coming, Miss Parker. Please have a seat." He put a number of pieces of paperwork on his desk and opened a heavy packet, saying, "I'm afraid what I have to tell you is quite serious. Over the past 2 years, your mother and sister have made some extremely bad financial choices. They have taken out large loans against your mother's home, liquidated the majority of their retirement accounts, and made large investments in what seems to be a fraudulent investment scheme." "How much are we talking about?" I was horrified. "The house your mother lives in is now mortgaged to its full value, and they owe significant amounts to several creditors. Victoria has been avoiding my calls because she knows the situation is dire. Together, they've lost about $400,000, Benjamin said quietly. I stared at the paperwork trying to process. The Benjamin added, "The investment firm they put their money into was shut down by federal authorities last month. The house that had been in our family for 25 years was basically gone. The numbers were $400,000. Due to their involvement in a Ponzi scheme, the principals have been arrested. Although there are hundreds of victims, your mothers and sisters. Losses are especially bad because they took out a loan against the house to boost their investment." "You're telling me this, but why?" Despite my suspicion that I already knew the answer, I inquired. "Due to the fact that their emergency is listed if the beneficiary or contact becomes incapable of making decisions for themselves, you have the legal right to act on their behalf. As well as Miss Parker." He was uneasy as he paused. "Unless someone steps in, they will lose everything over the next 60 days if they continue on their current course." The irony struck me like a blow to the body. It seems that I was my mother's sole option for financial salvation, yet she had exiled me from the family because I was an embarrassment. In a few days, I walked out of Benjamin's office with copies of financial paperwork that showed how dire things were for my family. I had time to comprehend the enormity of what I had discovered throughout the drive home. And by the time I arrived at my flat, my first feelings of amazement had given way to a mix of incredulity and rage. A business named Grandview Investment Partners had deceived Victoria and Brooke by promising them yearly profits of 25% on real estate development projects. Glossy pamphlets, phony testimonials, and a polished office in downtown Burlington were all part of the elaborate plan. The fact that the con artists had specifically targeted elderly people and their adult children made it especially nasty. Appealing to concerns about the security of retirement. I laid out the papers on my dining table and started figuring out how much harm had been done. When my father died 10 years ago, the house was worth about $600,000. Today, it had $550,000 in mortgage payments. Victoria had spent all of the money that should have been in her retirement accounts, which should have been at least $300,000. Brooke had even taken money out of his small 401k to make more investments. The monthly commitments were enormous. Victoria required at least $4,500 a month to keep things as they were, thanks to minimum payments on numerous credit cards and loans, insurance, electricity, and mortgage payments. Benjamin's records, however, indicate that her sole sources of income were Social Security and a meager pension from my father's business. Possibly $2,800 each month. That night, I gave Benjamin another call. "Before they lose the house, how long can this go on?" He responded, "I'd estimate they have maybe 6 weeks before the bank initiates foreclosure proceedings based on their current payment history. 3 different collection agencies have contacted me this week, and the credit card companies are already calling every day. Have you managed to get in touch with my mom? She has been staying away from banking institutions altogether. I believe she is aware of the dire situation and is unwilling to confront it." I ended the call and then sat in my kitchen, looking at the screen of my laptop. According to a brief web search, Victoria was mentioned in a number of Facebook pictures taken at social events and charity functions as recently as last week. In private, she was in danger of going bankrupt, but she was still preserving her public persona. I drove to her place once more the following morning. I didn't try to use my old key this time. Rather, I waited while ringing the doorbell. After a few minutes, with a tired appearance and averted gaze, Brooke responded. "Wendy, you shouldn't be here." "Mom said." "I know what Mom said," I said. Brooke's face turned white when he said, "But we need to talk about Benjamin Harris and Grandview Investment Partners." "How do you know about that?" "Because when you both decided to remove me from the family, you both evidently neglected to mention that I am your beneficiary and emergency contact." I pushed past her into the foyer, observing that the ancient grandfather clock that had belonged to my grandmother was gone, along with a number of pricey items of furniture, as well as the Persian rug that had served as the living room's focal point for as long as I could recall. "Where's Mom?" We didn't know who else to turn to, Wendy, so I asked. Brooke complained every week that she wasn't feeling well. The financial advisor appeared very genuine, and they claimed that we could double our money in 2 years. We believed that by mortgaging the house and cashing out your retirement accounts, we were being wise and preparing for the future. Despite my best efforts to remain composed, my voice rose, and Brooke started to cry. The ideal arrangement had turned into a perfect catastrophe. We believed that Mom would never have to worry about money again, and I wanted to contribute to my wedding expenses without approaching Derek's parents for financial support. Victoria at last, when she saw me standing in her living room, her expression shifted between surprise, anger, and something that appeared to be relief. "I told you not to come here," she said, but there was no force behind the words. She came out of her bedroom 20 minutes later, moving like a woman who had aged 10 years in the previous month. I answered, "Benjamin Harris told me everything." $400,000, Mom. You lost the house, your retirement, and Brooke's 401k. Victoria abruptly looked at all 68 of her years as she slipped into her last seat. How was I supposed to be aware that they were criminals? They had references, a lovely office, and testimonials from previous customers. Margaret Thornton from the Garden Club invested with them and said they were great, but I did my investigation, and she lost everything, too. Brooke objected, saying the man appeared to be very knowledgeable, explaining all about real estate development and showing us projected returns based on historical data. The entire thing was a Ponzi scheme, using the money of new investors to pay fake returns to earlier investors, and it collapsed when they couldn't find enough new victims. Data. They made up historical data, I told them bluntly. None of those projects ever happened. I took out my phone and showed them a news article about the arrests. The main organizers are charged with money laundering, securities fraud, and wire fraud at the federal level. We're going to lose the house, aren't we? Unless something drastically changes, yeah. Victoria glanced at the story, her hands trembling a little. They ran the operation for 3 years and stole almost $50 million from investors throughout New England. You owe more than it's worth, and you don't have the income to make the payments. What about bankruptcy? Brooke wondered anxiously. Could we declare bankruptcy and start over? I said, you could, but that would ruin your credit for years and still result in the loss of the house. Furthermore, difficulties do not go away when you file for bankruptcy. It only rearranges them. I glanced around the living room as the three of us sat in quiet for a few minutes, the situation weighing down on us like a thick blanket. Both women gave me eager looks, and I answered, there is another option, but it would require some significant changes. I had spent many hours as a child trying to envisage outsiders living here after the foreclosure. I could help, I added carefully. Have the money to manage the debt situation and halt the foreclosure, but it would require admitting some aspects of my life that you have both decided to ignore. Victoria's face hardened a little. What do you mean? I mean that you're disappointing. Factory worker daughter has been very successful, and I earn more than the two of you put together. I have a lot of money saved and invested, and I own my flat outright. Brooke stared at me, and I continued, enough to help, without getting into the details, but first I need to understand something. Victoria looked away in embarrassment. If you don't think so much of me and my choices, why did you list me as your beneficiary and emergency contact? Your father insisted on it when we updated our wills, claiming that you were the most responsible member of the family and that you would be the one to properly handle things if something were to happen to us. I muttered, Dad was right, but after what happened at Brooke's engagement party, I'm not sure I want to handle anything for people who treat me like a family embarrassment. The ball was now in their court, and I allowed the silence to linger. As my mother and sister took in the full brunt of their predicament, Brooke appeared as though she could be ill, and Victoria's meticulously preserved poise was crumbling. So, what happens now? Now you decide how badly you want to keep this house and avoid bankruptcy, Victoria finally said in a voice that was thinner than I had ever heard. Because I'm not writing any checks until we establish some new ground rules for how this family operates, I said. I carefully placed a notebook and pen on the coffee table after taking them out. First, we're going to have an honest chat about money. Everything. No more pretending. No more lying. No more sustaining appearances at the price of reality. Victoria gasped. Wendy, you don't understand the strain. I understand enough. I dropped her off. I understand that you were so obsessed with looking successful that you risked everything on a get-rich-quick scam. We never intended for things to get this bad. I said bluntly, intent doesn't matter when you're facing foreclosure. What matters is making smart decisions going forward. Brooke shifted uneasily. I understand that you were so busy judging my career choices that you failed to notice I was building actual wealth while you were destroying yours. The first wise move was to admit that I'm not the family failure you both believed me to be. I took out my notebook and started writing down what I'm willing to do. I'll settle your outstanding debts to prevent foreclosure, I'll combine your remaining commitments into a manageable payment plan, and I'll assist you both in creating sensible budgets that don't rely on miraculous investments. Returns. Victoria and Brooke looked at each other, hope starting to show on their faces, but I went on, in return, this family is going to function very differently moving forward. I will never again be treated like an embarrassment, have my job dismissed, or have financial decisions made without first consulting me. What sort of choices? All of them, Brooke said uneasily. I approve all expenses that exceed $500. Benjamin Harris and I review each investment possibility. And to ensure that this doesn't happen again, you two will enroll in financial literacy courses. Victoria appeared stunned. You're requesting that we cede our independence. No, I firmly said. I want you to let go of your illusions. The ensuing change was both gratifying and depressing. I made arrangements to settle the most urgent debts and stop the foreclosure process within 48 hours of our family gathering. It was evident that Victoria and Brooks were relieved, but I made sure they knew that things would not be going back to normal. I became the main point of contact for all creditors and financial organizations, which allowed me full insight into all of their expenditures. Their detachment from reality became evident during the first monthly budget review. A single dinner at Leonard for $300? Examining Brooks' credit card statement, I inquired. While you're allegedly having trouble making your mortgage payments. With feeble resistance, Brooke pointed out that it was Derek's birthday. We wanted to celebrate in a unique location. Without pity, I said, you can celebrate at Applebee's until your financial situation improves. Special events don't warrant expensive carelessness. Victoria was even more extravagant in her spending. To preserve her social standing, she makes philanthropic contributions, wears fancy clothes, and schedules hair appointments. While she claimed poverty, hundreds of dollars were being taken out each month. When I asked, she countered that the Garden Club has expectations. $200 to their silent auction. Instead of giving the Garden Club money you don't have, they may count on you to provide your time. I retorted. Losing your house isn't worth your social status. I completely reorganized their finances. Lives with my contribution to Velmark Automations. Efficiency. Weekly check-ins, limited credit limits, and automatic payments became the new standard. Both ladies were upset about the error, but when they lost $400,000 to a fraud, they had given up their right to financial freedom. The best part was when I told them that in order to help with household expenditures, they would both need to find work. Brooke had never had a full-time job, and Victoria hadn't worked outside the house in 30 years. But what will people think? Victoria questioned in horror. They'll think you're responsible adults who take care of their obligations, I responded. New idea, I understand. The last few weeks of Brooke took a job as a receptionist at a dental office, learning for the first time what it meant to have a boss and set working hours, and Victoria, who had spent years dismissing my career in manufacturing, found herself working part-time at a local boutique, dealing with inventory management and customer service. Both women struggled with the transition from their previous lives of leisure and social obligations to the reality of actual work. My family's financial rehabilitation was a masterclass in poetic justice. Employment. Brooke found the routine of regular work hours exhausting, and Victoria was always complaining about being on her feet all day. I don't understand how you've done this for years, Brooke said during one of our weekly financial meetings. Brooke was dealing with demanding clients, deadlines, and daily work. It's far more difficult than I anticipated. The irony that I was now managing the very people who had rejected my managerial abilities for years was not lost on me. Every financial decision that had previously been made impulsively now required my approval. That's because you never took it seriously, I responded. You both pretended that work was something that other people did while you concentrated on more significant things like charity lunches and social status. Benjamin Harris proved to be an excellent ally in maintaining financial discipline, providing monthly reports on their progress and helping me spot any signs of reverting to old patterns. Every expense had to be justified and documented. The control I exercised over their lives was complete and, I must admit, deeply satisfying. We reached a significant milestone 6 months after the crisis started. The house was no longer in immediate danger of foreclosure, and all credit card balances had been brought down to manageable levels. Victoria and Brooke had temporarily complied, out of fear of losing everything, but I knew that without constant supervision, they would probably return to their old behaviors. Levels, but more significantly, Victoria and Brooke had come to grudgingly respect the financial restraint that had kept them from going bankrupt. At our year-end family gathering, Victoria shocked me by confessing something she had never done before. Wendy, I owe you an apology, she said in a formal but earnest tone. You saved our family when we were too arrogant and stupid to save ourselves. And I was wrong about your career, wrong about your abilities, and wrong to treat you like a letdown. The apology was nice, but it couldn't make up for years of contempt and dismissal. "Thank you, Mom, but this isn't. I had no idea how hard you worked or how successful you'd become. I feel terrible that we made you feel like you didn't measure up when really we did." Brooke nodded emphatically. "It's not about proving I was right or you were wrong. It's about creating a family relationship based on honesty and mutual respect going forward." They weren't measuring up. As the year went by and the first anniversary of the crisis drew near, I thought about how drastically the family dynamic had changed. The daughter who had been shut out of her childhood home now had the keys to her family's financial future, and the embarrassment who wasn't invited to family events had become the person they relied on to survive. Both Victoria and Brooke suffered long-term repercussions from their financial carelessness, and as word got out about her work at the boutique, Victoria's standing in her social circles never entirely recovered. A number of her previous friends from the garden club turned away from her because they couldn't reconcile their perception of her with the truth. Diminished conditions. Tension arose when Brooke's wedding had to be drastically shortened. Derek's family and making her face the discrepancy between her goals and her financial situation. Reflecting on, I came to the realization throughout that turbulent year that although I had taken charge and brought some justice to the situation, I was surprised by how hollow the win seemed. I couldn't deny the satisfaction, though, of seeing those who had disregarded me come to value the variabilities they had previously disdained.